In India, in Pune particularly, at the Institute, they change. It depends on the weather, it depends on the people that are there, it depends on the evolution that are in this moment. Particularly when Guruji was there, he would teach something depending of what he could see, what the students needed. And so it's difficult for a person that goes only once to have a broader picture of what's going on.
Thank you for meeting with me and coming to visit again to Florida. We always love having you. So as a physicist, you're a trained physicist, right? How do you see this yoga world of spirituality and some kind of metaphysics, and how do the two worlds come together, the yoga and the scientist?
I think that now these boundaries between what is physics and mathematics and what is this Buddhism or the yoga, some of these boundaries are becoming not so, how can you say, not so clear. They are melting one to each other, and there are more and more scientists who are interested in spiritual paths, more and more.
They're learning from each other.
They are learning from each other. And what I found for myself, that the studies I did of physics and mathematics helped me to have a different way of thinking. It really changed your way of thinking. And when I study yoga, when I teach yoga, I have to be very scientific in my teaching.
You are very precise.
I have to be very precise. I have to start from one point, and then slowly I add something, I increase, but without contradiction from what I said before.
And there's also the internal quest for learning more and being interested in discovering things also.
What I try to do, I try to give some basic principles, and then to see how this principle can carry to something else. And this is what we do in the science. Now we have some principles, some ideas, and then we develop. We go on and we see where we arrive from that. And this is what I do with the yoga. And I hope that when I teach, people can, the students can, if they understand the principle, they can understand other asanas, if you are working with asanas. So you have the foundation, you have the basic to grow by yourself.
Now, as an international teacher, perhaps you get places where maybe things are done a different way. Like scientists do things maybe different ways, they look at different perspectives. Do you run into this, that maybe in some countries somebody's doing a pose one way and then you come and you have another way?
Of course it happens a lot. And it happens more with people that have done different kind of yoga, and then they come to my classes, and then I have to show them a different way of doing. So that's more a psychological work, because once we learn something, it's in our memory, it's in our understanding, in our memory. So I have to show a different way of doing. And it's the same like in the science. You can study a system using some law of physics, or you can study a system using different law of physics. And so I need to have the ability or the way to show, okay, you've been doing this way, there is also this other way. You can try and then see by yourself what works.
So then the student becomes the scientist.
the student becomes the scientist. The student becomes the one that has to discover what works or what doesn't work. And maybe both ways are right. When I was very young, I used to teach. I was always in this idea, I know better. I know how things should be done, and I know the truth. This is the way it is. Because I studied that way, I learned that way, and I had this kind of mentality. I don't have anymore. I really don't have anymore. I really think that any way of doing is fine. But if I'm in a place where I'm teaching, I have to show my way of doing. And then without this idea that my way is better or my way is the right one, and then the student has to make its own choices.
Well, even in India, you know, one teacher will go 1 year and they're teaching the foot flexed, and then they go back the next year and they're teaching the foot a different way. And so if it's different teachers that go and they see something that's being taught for that group, maybe it makes it back to a specific country as this is the way it's done from now on. And but it's always changing, it's always evolving.
This happens a lot. Mm-hmm. This happens a lot, particularly for the teacher that go to India and they go one time and then maybe they come back 5 years later, 6 years later, and then they have a different truth, and every time they have a different truth. And in India, in Pune particularly, at the Institute, they change. It depends on the weather, it depends on the people that are there, it depends on the evolution that are in this moment. Particularly when Guruji was there, he would teach something depending of what he could see, what the students needed. And so it's difficult for a person that goes only once to have a broader picture of what's going on. And I've been there with Guruji 1 year teaching one thing, the year after teaching something different, and then something different. And when other teachers ask me what is the latest fashion, they call it fashion, I don't agree with this way of saying. It's not a fashion, it's a different way to look at the same thing. So 1 year you can work more on extension of the front of the body, 1 year you can work more on the extension of the back of the body, 1 year you work on extending the back and the front at the same time, 1 year you work more on the opening, or making your chest broader. And the same is what happens in the physics. You can study statistics, you can study dynamic, you can study thermodynamic, you can study different aspects of the nature, but it's still the nature, it's still, and then it's still yoga, even if you work in a different way. And what is important in the yoga is that you understand why you do something. And this is when I teach, I always try to when I teach a different way of doing something, I always would like that the students understand why we are doing something, why we are doing in a different way, and what is the benefit, what is advantage and disadvantage of doing in a certain way. So then the students, and particularly the teachers, can understand when is the right moment to do in one way and when is the right moment to do in another way. There is not the right way, but there is a way that is better in a certain moment or with certain kind of bodies.
And then there's always there's always, you don't forget the ABCs of the basics.
Yeah. I call it the alphabet. I say, I'm teaching the alphabet, and if you know the alphabet, if you know the grammar, then you can talk. If you don't know the alphabet, you cannot write, you cannot do anything. And it's important. And also what I found it very challenging and very interesting is the different proportion of the body of the people. And sometimes, like if I teach in East countries where people have longer spine and a longer neck and longer head, when they do head balance, for example, the neck and the head is longer than the arms. So maybe they need to put a support under the arms to help the different proportion of the body. And like sometimes somebody has a very long arm and a very short neck and head, so they need the support under the head. So if the students, the practitioner understand the reason why you do some change, then they can understand when to apply it or not to apply this. And the yoga has been invented by a population, by people that had long arms, long legs, very flexible with the body, and this is not enough for everybody.
So yoga is not one size fits all.
It's not one size fits all.
This is really the gift that B.K.S. Iyengar has left us, that those of us that have short arms, we have props.
And if you try to do yoga one size fits all, then when you get injuries.
Right.
Yeah. And sometimes that people cannot, if you have a very long spine, for example, and it's very difficult to do Bakasana. You can't force to do Bakasana for a person who has a long spine because they cannot reach with the leg. They cannot put the legs on the arms unless they bend so much the spine. That is not healthy.
And that's really the challenge of being a teacher also, is to be able to see what's in front of you, which is what they do in Pune. They see the students and they teach to that, what's right there in that moment.
And this is why it happens that somebody's there and say, oh, we do it this way, or no, we are doing this other way. And sometimes I teach and then somebody say, no, Geeta was saying this way. Oh no, Guruji was saying this way. And then I say, yes, but this was in the year, this year, because fortunately I've been going every year. So fortunately I've seen so many changes, and most of the times I can recognize when a person has been in Pune, and I say, okay, we taught this way because
This is the effect.
this is a factor, or because in that time they were teaching this for this reason. And then Guruji changed, and then Geeta changed it.
What is it that all of us have in common in all of these different countries that you see?
What is in common, I think that when somebody starts to do a yoga practice, and it doesn't matter what kind of practice it is, they find some benefits. The benefit can be physical, mental, emotionally, so they continue in this path, and also they encourage other friends to come and to try, and this is how yoga is spreading more and more. And so the people find some internal peace, some well-being that is totally different from being happy, from shopping, or from having a beautiful house, from eating cakes, from having a beautiful clothes, because the material world does not really give inner peace, does not give this peace that you find when you have a personal practice.
Thank you so much, Gabriella.
Okay.
It's always a pleasure talking.
What is important in the yoga is that you understand why you do something. And this is when I teach, I always try to when I teach a different way of doing something, I always would like that the students understand why we are doing something, why we are doing in a different way, and what is the benefit, what is advantage and disadvantage of doing in a certain way. So then the students, and particularly the teachers, can understand when is the right moment to do in one way and when is the right moment to do in another way. There is not the right way, but there is a way that is better in a certain moment or with certain kind of bodies.